listening to the ACE podcast with me, Pete Paphides. It's always a delight to catch up with today's guest. Like so many incurable record collectors, she remembers the eureka moment which set her on her path. That involved an encounter with Maxine Darren's How Can I Hide It From My Heart, which featured on a 1990 compilation called Here Come the Girls. But even before then, the writing was on the wall, or rather on the pages of Plume, the fanzine she started aged 14, when her record store bag was more likely to contain records by My Bloody Valentine, Slowdive or Bikini Kill. She was still a teenager when she decided to move from her native New York to London in order to make it in the music industry, and 3 years later, armed with considerably bigger contacts book, she returned to New York and launched a new publication, the magnificent Cha-Cha Charming. To call it a fanzine would be to evoke something less sophisticated than what was a beautifully written labour of love, which made room not just for 60s girl pop, but for metal and Japanese chart pop. Cha-Cha Charming continues to thrive on the World Wide Web, and its creator has continued to thrive in the non-virtual world, living her best life and sharing her passions via a variety of enterprises. These include her weekly WFMU radio show, Sophisticated Boom Boom, her monthly residency at Brooklyn's Our Wicked Lady Club, editing Ilon Paz's acclaimed photography book, Dust and Grooves, Adventures in Record Collecting, and last, but very much not least, a string of sublime compilation albums that she's worked on, including ace releases such as Love Hit Me, Decca Beat Girls 1963 to 1970, Marylebone Beat Girls 1964 to 1967, and 2 volumes of Japanese 60s pop gems, Nippon Girls 1 and 2. And lest we forget the liner notes for the reissue of Girl Talk, the 1964 album by her beloved Leslie Gore. All that remains is to introduce her. Sheila B, or to her family, Sheila Burgle. How are you?
I'm excellent and jet-lagged.
Good. Well, I'll try. My job is to make you forget that you're jet-lagged.
Okay.
When did you arrive? When did you land?
I arrived yesterday morning.
Okay.
So I'm still a little, hopefully I'll have the facts in my brain, but...
Did you manage to sort of stay awake until sort of bedtime?
No, I have a routine when I come to London. I arrive, I have a very large English breakfast. So love your English breakfast.
And where do you go for this English breakfast?
I stay with my cousin in Kensal Rise, and there's a place around the corner from her, and I was just dreaming about it on the flight. I landed. I say, please, can we go to that place? I don't remember the name of it. They take me straight there, come back to our place, nap, and then I'm ready to go.
Wow. Okay. And what are the essential non-negotiable components of this breakfast? What does it have to have?
2 poached eggs. Beans, even though I don't eat the beans, but I like them on display. Bacon, classic, tomato, mushroom, and what else am I missing? And sausage.
Sausage. I find that you have to have, my favorite thing about the beans is that I get cut little slices of sausage and then kind of dip it in the bean juice. Is that not? Are you just not going there?
I'll have one bite of that and then I skip the beans, but I like to have it on the plate. I know it's odd. It's probably an American thing.
That's for there's a certain aesthetic integrity to that decision that I can only respect.
Thank you.
Is the English breakfast sort of become a thing at all in the States, in New York, where you live?
No, we still have the American waffles, pancakes, the unhealthy version.
Okay, and if I'm a guest of yours in New York and I want the sort of perfect American breakfast, where are you going to take me?
I take you to the few remaining old diners that are left in New York, and that's not many, sadly. I think, like so many cities, New York has lost its many record shops, it's lost its many diners, it's lost many of its mom and pops.
That's actually, I make a beeline for on my first full morning in New York at any given time. I'll get up super early and just kind of watch the sun come up from the kind of window of a diner, and I just can't get over the kind of endlessly refilled cup of filter coffee. Is it filter? It's not even filter. What is it? I don't even know what it is.
I'm a tea drinker, so I don't know, but I think it is filtered coffee.
And I'm really, I get corny earworms, so I'll get New York State of Mind by Billy Joel in my head. All the kind of things that must seem woefully obvious are overdone to you. Anyway, So we've touched on some of your sort of, what I love about what was great about sort of summing up, introducing you. The phrase that really I zoned in on, you do seem to be someone who's living your best life. Your passions have turned into the thing that you just do.
Absolutely. And then it's so nice to have that said, back to me. I am living my best life, and I've taken the love of my life, which is girl groups, into every aspect of what I do. And how lucky am I, really?
And, let's talk about this eureka moment, because, I didn't really know this about you until fairly recently. I thought you must have, maybe your parents were playing girl groups when you were 3 or something. You got a head start, but you didn't get a head start.
No, I had the Bee Gees as my beginning. That's my first memory of music. So it makes sense, right? Considering the vocal harmonies and the femininity of the Bee Gees.
What Bee Gees songs?
It was the Guilty album. That's how I went to
so-
sleep. So that album means the world to me. And Barry Gibbs, I think, his chest hair that appears on the sleeve, very memorable.
Chest hair is going out of fashion. I've got 2 daughters. They're disgusted by chest hair. There's been a paradigm shift in the perception of male hair.
Yeah, it's all up here now. It's all facial. Sadly, it'll move back again. It'll keep going up and down.
It's migrated. Yeah. So those are your earliest sort of. So Barry. So you got kind of the best of Barry and Barbara in one package.
Absolutely. So that was there, and then I moved into various other types of music, but girl groups was never a part of it. And it was when I was I was obsessed with indie music. I was writing my fanzine Plume, and at some point in the mid 90s, I felt indie music had totally lost its way. I think in England, I was always looking to England, reading Melody Maker and NME, because I just feel like England is it is the place, really, musically, I think. And the Blur versus Oasis battle had begun, and I thought how absolutely dull compared to everything else that came before it. So I was really disheartened, and I thought indie music has lost its way. The chart pop in 1995 was awful in the US. And I think I just happened upon the Here Come the Girls compilations that Mick Patrick and Malcolm Baumgart, now at Ace, they put together. And so on this compilation was the Maxine Darren track you mentioned, and I just thought, this record sounds like nothing I've ever heard. Every moment is bliss. Every melody is just far beyond any of the melodies that I'm hearing at that time. And then that coincided with me. So I discovered that compilation. I moved to London at the age of 17. I just graduated high school. I thought, I'm going to move to London. It's going to be, Slow Dive are going to be playing on the corner. Chapter House are going to be at the local bar. And then, of course, it's like pub rock when I arrive.
So you'd missed it, basically.
I missed it. And it was so upsetting. And I got a internship at Too Pure just after Stereolab and the Faith Healers and all the bands had left, and they signed a band called Jack. I don't know if that shows
I remember
you.
Jack.
Yes.
Yeah. They had one really great song, White Jazz.
Right. So, but that kind of shows where even Too Pure showed where they were at the times, right? From Stereolab to, it's a very big difference. And then Bob Stanley, who now is also at Ace, a very good friend of mine, and he invited me over for tea, and we sat in his living room, and he brought down a stack of Franz Gall EPs. And that was Eureka moment number 2. And that's what changed me from a mere, happy to have the CDs into a record collector. I thought, these melodies, like the Maxine Darren records, so out of this world, so moving, so fantastic. I'm dedicating myself to this. And from that moment on, I started buying records, and I started with French and British girl groups.
So that really was like a portal. Yeah, it's like in Scooby-Doo when the bookcase slides open and suddenly you're thrust into a whole other world.
Yes, and I've never been back into the world when I was 17. It's like I've been here forever, and I thought at some point, you think this is a phase, or, I'm going to grow out of this and move on to something else. Well, hell no. This is my life.
The thing about, and I don't sort of rummage as assiduously as you do or as Bob does. But it seems to be like a fathomless, I can't see the bottom of this sort of well of brilliance, and I'm constantly discovering things that, and I see, because I go out record shopping with Bob a lot as well. And even he's getting it. And you think, well, if Bob Stanley is still discovering something that came out on CBS in 1967 that he didn't know about, then how much stuff was being put out?
It's unbelievable. I mean, the wealth of material, and that it is bottomless, and so that's what can keep one going for life. I mean, just when I think, okay, I surely know most of the girl groups that came out in the U.S. Like, no, I don't. I don't even know how much I know because there's no way to gauge.
Well, in the US as well, obviously, it's kind of complicated and as a result made more interesting by the fact that you had these regional scenes, so I guess you can really zone in on different sort of parts of the is that something that you've had a chance to sort of really explore?
Yeah, I mean, I do explore like the regions and also major label versus independent. I mean, you just find these one-off things, or like the father of a girl garage band would like release their daughter's record, like this shambolic thing that probably only pressed a few hundred copies. So it's gigantic, the kind of possibilities for this music, and it's really never ending.
Yeah, I mean, every time you sort of go down a sort of Discogs rabbit hole at 1 a.m, and you sort of and partly because of the way Discogs works. So if you have if you find a singer, and it'll sort of tell you all the other iterations of the groups they might have played with, and then you click on them, and then you'll find some kind of some homemade website in Detroit which will tell you about a singer that was popular just in about 3 venues between 1968 and 1970. And suddenly, you're back on Discogs looking at records which cost far more money than whatever it was that you were looking for in the first.
I know, the danger of the rabbit hole. And I have that with songwriters too. Like actually recently, one of the shows that I did for Sophisticated Boom Boom, I focused on a songwriter named Rosemarie McCoy. And I was thinking she's written quite a few, well-known hits, but so many obscure records from, early R&B to like late 60s. And I just thought, now I have to have everything that she wrote. So that's like, now my want list is double in its size. And here I am, like 24 years into collecting girl groups, and I'm only discovering this songwriter. And she wrote, I don't know if you know the track Marie Queenie Lyons, See and Don't See.
Oh, do I know? Oh, my word.
Isn't that the great? I mean, that's one of the greatest records ever made, I think.
Yes, I mean, every single component of that song and the lyric as well. The lyric's so good.
So that's Rosemarie McCoy. And it's like, well, who's Rosemarie McCoy? And then I start digging in, and it's like she's written for Ruth Brown, and she's written for Esther Phillips and Big Maybelle, and her story is fascinating. So I just think this is what happens to me. Like, this is my life, like discovering that one person and then having to buy everything, or then discovering, oh, well, then actually Maxine Brown did the original version of See and Don't See, which came out on her album.
How does that compare?
It's not as tough, but it's beautifully arranged and it's very different. So, I mean, to me, it's a flawless song. So whatever version you're going to get is going to be pretty great.
It's funny. There are songs that, you'd have to really work hard to screw them up,
Exactly. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's such a clever song as well, See and Don't See. And just, it really, it's about a very particular thing, and it's just exquisite.
It is.
Anyway, so just to backtrack a bit, your parents must have been amazing because first of all, you decided to do a fanzine at 14, and most people's parents would have been like, "Excuse me, you need to be focusing on your studies a bit," or that wasn't an issue, was it?
It wasn't, because the story about me when I was an infant was that I was obsessed with music, and that everyone in my family knew I was going to be in the arts in some way or shape or form. So they had accepted it, and they saw it, that I was so focused on my passion from the moment that, Barry Gibb and Barbara Streisand album came into my life. So they just knew and I'm one of those. It's like, if I'm into it, that's it. Like, there's no one can convince me. So I just I was just so completely focused. I hated school. I was miserable. The fanzine was my only, savior. I was in class writing my fanzine. That's what I was doing. I wasn't paying attention to any of the courses.
That's, but hats off to your parents, because that's, I think to have a child that basically knows where they're headed, and is just a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing for them, because they're spared the uncertainty that makes so much of adolescence difficult for people.
Right.
Because you have certainties in your life, and when those certainties are records and really great records, then you might end up having a really great life,
Totally, and that life has been great. And I actually had this conversation with my mom recently, and she said, Sheila, you're so lucky because you have this passion and it will always be with you, and you can go anywhere in the world and hook up with people that feel the same way about you, DJ their parties, go out for lunches and talk about this music, go shopping together, and it really is it's a great thing. It's almost like I have my constant companion and I never have to worry.
And so presumably by the age of 17, I mean, my oldest daughter is 17 now, and you would have said to your parents, I'm off to London for a bit now. Wish me well. That was cool, was it?
They were concerned, but they also thought, I have my father's German, and he did the same thing. Like he got out of Germany as soon as he could. So he understands wanting to leave home and just be on your own and explore, and that the greatest learning can come from that. So I encourage you to encourage your daughters to to get out into the world. And we fall down, but you learning how to pick yourself up and hey, I can't. This is how coming to London was life-changing. Discovering these girl groups, hanging out with Bob Stanley, Mick Patrick, these men that took me under their wing.
What were the record shops you were going to at the time?
I remember Hanway Street so well. I loved that place because there were a few scattered about. I found Lorraine Silver's The Happy Faces, which is I think it's on Pi, for like £5. Now it goes for a fortune.
Oh my word.
So just like nobody was out looking for this stuff, with a vengeance. So that was a great place. Beano's. Bob introduced me to Beano's.
4 floors at the time.
I used to just walk in to the place where that man with the very long beard, he stood by the 45s, and I would say, 60s UK British girl, 60s British girls, please. And he'd bring out these like metal shelves filled with 45s, and my heart would just like, as I'm going through them.
That feeling, that accelerated pulse, I remember it well.
Heaven.
And you have, you're talking about, your parents and this kind of environment where, you can just sort of feel free to indulge your passions. And another place where that happens is your weekly radio show.
Yes.
3 hours. I mean, I host a weekly radio show, so I know how much time it takes to really kind of properly curate a show where, every song is there for a reason. And now I'm guessing, unless unless you have some kind of secret sponsor, this cannot be paying for itself. So this is like a labor.
This is a labor of love, absolutely. And I put so much work into it, and I say that with I love this work that I put into it. I mean, sometimes I want to pull my hair out because I was thinking, I can't spend 2 hours on a segue, on one segue. But just, one thing that the radio show has put me in touch with is quality new music, because I have been one of those people for a long time that's been their head so deeply in the 60s and 70s even, that I've been so dismissive of what's been coming out and kind of looking at the charts and being so distressed by what I'm hearing. And then the radio show reminded me that what the quality is not on the charts. The quality is far beyond it, and there is so much to explore. There are so many people making music because of the accessibility to, the tools to make music, and there are some records that have blown my mind. And so my show is to like a place to show these records and also to dig into my collection and play the stuff from the past. So it's a real mixture.
Yeah. And you're in New York. I mean, even over here, some great new bands kind of filter through, even to hear that kind of seem to be coming through and Brooklyn.
Brooklyn,
mainly.
yeah.
It feels like there's a lot going on. I mean, there's a band, the Shacks, for instance.
Yeah, Big Crown Records.
Yeah,
a lot of good
that
stuff.
label itself seems to be putting out some fantastic stuff.
Absolutely.
What else has sort of turned your head in that?
You know, I mean, she's not a new artist, but her new album, the US Girls album on 4AD, is unbelievable.
Oh, good.
I drove to Philadelphia a couple days before coming to London to see her because she didn't play New York this time around, and I think I'm just going to follow her around the country because she's one of the greatest live acts I've seen in ages. The melody, the kind of integrity in her music is so mind-blowing. I just adore her.
Are you one of these people that will, if you'll see someone like that and you'll just seek her out, you have to just kind of get an audience with them and tell them what you think about them, or are you a bit more laid back about it?
Laid back is the last word to describe me. I'm overly enthusiastic. If I get my hands on something I'm obsessed with, everyone I need that I know needs to know about them, and I almost want to shake my friends like, you have to love this.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so happy to have this radio show, because I can just sit on my show and say, this is the greatest record you've ever heard. You must listen to this, the second verse lyrics, wait for the middle eight here. I can go into deep, analysis of why the stuff is brilliant.
People want that. I think listeners want that because, we're so, everyone's kind of time poor, we're deluged with content. And if you have someone who's sifting through it for you and you trust them, then that's kind of what, we need to have those people in our lives who we can sort of rely on a little bit to kind of help us filter through all the kind of noise, So
completely.
And you know who's listening, don't you, from all over the world?
But there's a comments board. People check in, like, hello from Montenegro, good morning from New Zealand. I'm like, wow, It's funny. It's just one of those things where I complain because, there's so much of everything and so almost sometimes too much choice, too much access. But then I think, God, normally, 20 years ago, you'd just be speaking to an audience that's, in a certain vicinity, like maybe 200 or 300 miles. And now, I can be broadcast everywhere. What a treat.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, the right time to sort of be doing what we're doing, really.
Completely.
So you came back from London after 3 years. I mean, your enthusiasm seems to get you into these really fascinating sort of situations. So I think I might have met you for the first time by this point, but then I suddenly heard, again, our mutual friend Bob told me that suddenly you were head of A&R at Xenomania.
Yes. How did I end up there?
Well, having asked the question, would you like to answer it?
That was all. Yeah. So I moved to London in 96 or 95 after I graduated high school, and then went back to New York, lived and worked in New York for many years. And then in 2007 came back to London. And that was when I hooked up with Brian Higgins, who was the head of Xenomania. And at the time, Xenomania were writing songs for Girls Aloud and Sugar Babes and kind of furnishing the labels with songs. And they decided, we actually want to do our own label. We want to find our own act. So Brian Higgins and I had a really interesting conversation. He has a great vision. And we just hit it off. And he said, come on board as A&R. And I think he has a tendency, he's kind of one of those men that likes to say, you're going to be good. You're going to be brilliant at this. Almost kind of instill this confidence in you, and then take it away at the end. But we won't go into that.
Okay.
Put this confidence in you and say you can do it, and then you do it. It's someone having enormous faith in you. And so I went out into England and the States doing auditions, put together girl groups, found solo artists, and we built a roster at Xenomania.
Some great things came from that. I mean, there were some great Mini Viva tracks that I still play now. Tell us a little bit about Mini Viva, because I think that's my favourite.
Yeah, Mini Viva. They were my baby. They started off as a four-person girl group. That was my dream. I'm like, I'm the lover of girl groups. Let's put together a girl group. And then there were obviously, conflicts, and these were young women and what was going to work out. And so in the end, the two of the girls, Britt and Frankie, really ended up, loving each other. So we just said, okay, let's have a duo. There hasn't been a duo in a while. And then the first single, Left My Heart in Tokyo, was a top 10 hit, and they went on tour and all seemed really well. But this was also, at Xenomania, there was a lot of darkness. It was as much as it was a wonderful place, it was a dark place. And so the whole thing imploded.
Okay. And so was the darkness. I mean, I guess, when you're under so much pressure to sort of provide hits, then, that kind of turns people crazy, turns places crazy.
It does.
But to have just kind of worked in a building where people were, I guess Girls Aloud were presumably kind of passing through
All the time.
and you were seeing, because Xenomania had a very particular way of working, didn't it? So that you would often, in this instance, Girls Aloud wouldn't even know how a song, because they'd have to sing bits of songs, wouldn't they?
Yes.
And it wasn't until they heard the record back till they realised which bits of songs were on.
That's exactly it. It was a method that worked. Brian really brought great, talented people in there. I mean, we were in the house that belonged to Alice Little, who was the woman that inspired Alice in Wonderland. It was a listed house. It was an ancient house in Westrom in Kent. I mean, imagine me like a New Yorker commuting to Kent every day for work. It was hilarious. And then you had little cubby holes, each filled with an engineer or a lyric writer or a melody writer, and magical pop music was being made. So to witness this firsthand was really special. So even though it all went horribly wrong and all of us suffered a lot from the end of it, it was so worth it to be able to experience that.
No reunions, no Christmas card lists
I
anytime
see.
soon.
No, I see. Actually, the funny thing, when you work with a lot of people under a dictator, those people really bond. So it's a lifelong bond. And actually, tonight I'm going out with a whole bunch of them.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Happy to hear something good has been salvaged from the situation. Okay, I'm kind of in a roundabout way. I'm coming to some of the work you've done with Ace Records, and I guess this is kind of my into talking about the two wonderful Japanese pop compilations you've put together, Nippon Girls 1 and 2. Before we just precisely go on to there, I think we need to talk about, again, this, I guess it's all emblematic of your slightly monomaniacal kind of way of doing things. Your move to Tokyo at the age of 24, was it?
Yes, 24.
I mean, you've made it sound you were moving to Tokyo to just get the records that you needed to get. To sort of, I mean, was it that simple?
It was actually I didn't realize the records would be such a big part of it. I moved primarily to learn Japanese. So when I moved back from London to New York in the late 90s, actually this ties in heavy metal as well. I love telling the story because I was an obsessive Megadeth fan for a very long time, and I was listening to girl groups and Megadeth and a lot of other metal bands at the time. And I kind of followed Megadeth around a little bit. I went on this fan club tour and saw them play 3 times. And at the end of it, we got to meet the band, and I handed the guitar player Marty Friedman a copy of Cha Cha Charming. 3 weeks later, I get a letter in the mail saying, "Oh my God, Sheila," it's from Marty Friedman, "I'm a record collector too. I love girl groups. I collect Elvis records. We have to meet up. We have to talk about this. Do you know Japanese music? Because my wife is Japanese. I speak Japanese. I'm obsessed with Japanese pop music." So I write him back, "I have no idea." He sends me a mixtape, and Eureka moment number 3, the Japanese pop stuff.
Amazing.
Yes.
Just amazing.
So yes, the guitarist of Megadeth introduces me to really wonderful Japanese pop music from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And from that moment on, I decided I want to dedicate myself to learning Japanese. So I majored in Japanese in college, and I decided when I graduate, I'm moving to Tokyo. I'm going to go and see all my favorite bands. Kind of similar attitude to how when I first moved to London, I want to just be surrounded by this music. So moved to Tokyo. And there I discovered these compilations called Cutie Pops Collection, which was Japanese 60s girls. And at first I was disappointed. It sounds very different. It's not Franz Gall. It's not the Shangri-Las. There's a kind of dissonant sound. There's a darkness to it. It's rooted in this Japanese blues, which is called enka. Very kind of sorrowful, heavily vibrato voice. And I couldn't latch onto that at first, but after a while it grew on me. And then that again, click. Now I need to collect all these records. And so while I was there, I was able to dig for all this stuff that nobody was. I mean, Japan was not on the map in the Western world musically yet. Maybe with Pizzicato 5 a little bit, with Puffy a little bit, but nobody had explored really the 60s stuff except for Ace and Big Beat, who had done the GS I Love You compilations in around, I think, the late 90s. So they were ahead of the game. then I was DJing this stuff in Japan, and I was, just chatting with, Japanese fans about this music, and they thought I was a crazy person. Like, why am I, 24-year-old girl listening to Mayuzumi Jun, who's like one of the pop singers.
Yeah.
And then I thought, I want to present this music to the West, because also there's this, being a student of Japanese, you're also confronted with this kind of exoticism that's in the kind of the idea of, like Japanese women. I was in class with so many men wanting to learn Japanese so they could go out with Japanese girls, and just this way of presenting Japan as the other, and Orientalism and all that. So I thought I'm aware of this, so I can do this in a way.
You need to do this as it deserves to be done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And thus, Nippon Girls.
But you've cut a long story. It's kind of short, but, because it was quite a while before Nippon Girls came out. Now, you mentioned this sort of, I guess, this kind of equivalent of Japanese blues called enka. I mean, the music that you put together on these compilations is, it is kind of other, but it sounds immediately like pop.
Yes.
So, and you're a pop fan, so it must have just scratched that itch for you straight away.
Oh yeah, it did. It just I had an expectation and I was disappointed. I thought this stuff was going to sound like Franz Gall, and it didn't. It's not.
Yeah,
it doesn't have
like
the
no.
It doesn't have the softness in the voice. It's much harsher, and some of the arrangements, the chords are different. So it definitely needed to grow on me, and once it did, that was it.
And a lot of the songs are on you sort of have to, you're almost blinded by their idiosyncrasies, a lot of them, and so you have to get over the sort of novelty, and then you sort of, tell me about some of your favorite discoveries.
Definitely Jun Mayuzumi's Black Room, which is I think one of the opening track on. I mean that basically started it all. I had bought the single that was a big hit, flipped it over, discovered Black Room, and thought this is the most incredible R&B funk Japanese record I've ever heard. I can't, and nothing tops that record. I still continue to search, and I've never found a record as good as that. So that had to
start everything off.
It started everything off. That's number one, and that's always the record that's in my DJ box. And now many people DJ that record around the world. It's kind of a
gratifying.
Yeah. God, what other ones do I love? There's a songwriter and arranger and producer named Tsutsumi Kyohei who I'm obsessed with, and his tracks are all over Nippon Girls. So
what's his sort of signature? What is sonically? What is it that sets his songs apart?
The melodies are to me. He was. I imagine. I don't know, but I would imagine he's obsessed with Burt Bacharach and Hal David. Well, Hal David less because it's the lyrically Japanese. But yeah, I think the kind of complexity of melody, yet also very, obviously catchy. So I mean, that's what Bacharach is. He's such a master of this kind of. You're like, this shouldn't make sense and be so catchy because it's so complicated. Yet it is. And so I think Tsutsumi Kyohei has that as well. So whatever he did is melodically beautiful, and he definitely was very knowledgeable about Western music, and he had a long career. I mean, he was writing great records in the 80s and 90s as well.
Okay.
So he worked very closely with Ayumi Ishida, who's also on there, Mieko Hirota, who's on that compilation.
Often you don't know what you're hearing, but you love it. Like the Keiko Marie track.
Tsukikage no Rendezvous.
Yeah.
So cute, that song.
It's like something from a film, I would imagine. But I don't know, really. I don't exactly know what I'm listening to. I just know I love it.
I know. It's as sweet and wonderful as it sounds, lyrically and its feel.
So this is quite some undertaking. So you before you kind of went over there to learn Japanese in earnest, you said you'd majored in it?
I majored, right? Yeah, I studied a lot here, in New York.
I mean, this is a kind of like a leitmotif running through your life. You sort of, I read somewhere else that, when you decided to learn heavy metal guitar, what a thing to learn,
I was a really good heavy metal guitar player, and then I just dropped it. That's another thing I do, aside from the girl group stuff, is I get really into something, and then I move on. So I can't. If, like, put me in Japan right now, I think I'd struggle to speak very well, even though I dedicated a good 8-9 years of my life to it.
Was there a specific metal guitar course that you did, or did you do a course and that you adapted what you learnt to metal guitar?
No, I just played along to Megadeth records 6 hours a day. I'd be in school, come home, and just play guitar.
Well, that would do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess to people listening, people would be like, okay, where's the in the Venn diagram between girl groups and Megadeth? How do I get my head around this?
I was asked this question in an interview recently, actually, and the answer is melody. I mean, Dave Mustaine is a master melody writer. And again, you mentioned this thing of having to get past certain elements of music in order to really be able to get to the kind of nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
I think that's the same with Megadeth. Like, you might hear Megadeth and think, it's hard to get past, those shrieking guitars. And Dave Mustaine has a very distinct voice that's often unpleasant to people. But if it gets you, you can. He's a melodic master. I mean, he really is.
Okay. Well, obviously, I want to go and listen to Megadeth now. Well, maybe not now, but maybe tonight. Let's. So we've talked a little bit about Nippon Girls, and so you've got this this lovely arrangement here with, and it is, this is my first visit to the Ace HQ, and it's lovely to get the tour actually and to see, the gentleman who kind of does, masters old 1948 sort of acetates in order for, and it's like my romantic notion of what a record company is. So it's lovely to. Let's talk a little bit about the Beat Girls compilations and. I guess
my first love, the British girls.
So which one? There's one that you so is it?
So Love Hit Me is the one that I'm involved in different ways in both, but I'd say Love Hit Me, I wrote all the notes. Marylebone Girls, I helped with some tracks and I wrote the introduction.
And you helped, so you co-compiled it with Mick Patrick, who obviously was a sort of a guiding sort of hand at the very beginning. So Mick Patrick will have sort of seen your sort of transition from someone who wanted to know about this stuff, who's now just a leading authority on it, which must be very gratifying for him.
Oh my God! I mean, when you say even the name Mick Patrick, my heart warms because he is such a special human in my life, and I'm so lucky that he's in my life, and I owe so much to him, really, for this work. As I said, when I first moved to London, I met him. He took me under his wing, was so generous with the knowledge, the records, putting me in touch with people. And funnily enough, this is how beautiful life can be, is like the Here Come the Girls compilations that him and Malcolm did together. There was one last one that Sam, who's also at Ace Records now, that she put together for Sanctuary. And Sam and Mick asked me to do the liner notes. So that was my first liner notes project. Wow. The compilation that changed my life. I got to do the liner notes for the final one. And so, these are 60s British female singers, and I've been collecting them since the day I started buying records, when I was, collecting records. I've been buying records since I was a kid, but, since I moved to London at age 17. So these, to be able to. So those compilations are old now. They're like late 80s, early 90s, and so now these are bringing. How would I say this? It's like trying to really hit the point home that the British female artists have a lot of quality, because I feel that a lot of people think, oh, well, it's the American girls, the Northern Soul, the kind of, the girl groups, the Ronettes, that's the real good stuff. I think people can be quite dismissive of the British girls. It's kind of like second tier. And I would say that's so, you can't, the two, you can't compare the two. There's such a different sound in the production and in the value and in like what they were going for. So it's really I think Love Hit Me and Marylebone Beat Girls are saying, this stuff is fantastic. Let's show you. Let's find another way to show the world.
As a sort of New Yorker coming to it with that sort of distance, what's the appeal? You know, sort of. So you know, we talk about, I guess, the artists. I'm thinking about, you know, sort of, you know, Billy Davis or the young Julie Driscoll before she kind of went in the slightly more jazzy mode. What also the McKinleys, which is, but also people like who I can't see in front of me, people like Kiki D and. What is it that kind of makes those, I guess, maybe exotic even to you, or certainly excite? What is it that you think gives them that edge?
I think when I'm listening to American girl groups, you know, if I was going to take the Chiffons and the Ronettes and, you know, even some of the more obscure artists like Bernadette Carroll, I feel like I'm listening to girls. When I listen to these artists, I feel like I'm listening to women. These are like tough girls. Like Billie Davis, even though she was a teenager, she was sexy and womanly and fearless. I feel like they just stood out in a kind of more I am woman way, as opposed to the girl groups in the States, or even though the Shangri-Las were tough, I feel like they were still girls. And that's one. And then the production is also, I think, a little bit more rock and roll, less sweet.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the McKinleys, yes, they have kind of Spectre-esque kind of sweet records, but say like on Marylebone Beat Girls, Helen Shapiro's "Stop and You Will Become Aware." I mean, that's such a tough, like, banging soul record, you know, and Helen Shapiro's voice is so strong and, like, you know, like really like none I've ever heard.
Yeah, they say there's a kind of loudness about a lot of these records. A lot of them are just recorded really loudly, and so there is almost, you know, even when there's almost, with a lot of them, there's almost a sort of hint that, you know, you're kind of on the cusp of something kind of freak beaty.
Exactly, like freak beat is a great word for this kind of stuff. Where there's less of that in American, you know, female pop music in the 60s. I mean, there are the, you know, there's some like banging northern soul, you know, northern you know, Motown stuff, but really, I think the British girls made tougher productions. Yeah. And yeah.
The McKinley's track "Sweet and Tender Romance" is a case in point. I mean, it's just it's thrilling.
Yeah.
And then I saw that there's even footage of it from Ready Steady Go on YouTube. I mean, isn't that a great thing when you just look more in hope than expectation? You think, surely this can't exist. Surely there can't be surviving footage of this song that wasn't a hit. Why would there be?
Yeah.
And then you kind of go, and then these moving images flicker in front of you. I mean,
it's great. And then with England, is what's so nice is like you get, you know, I used to go to the British Library and look through old melody makers and see all of these women featured, where America being such a big country, most of these women never had a chance to go on TV, or, you know, every one of these women really felt, I mean, I've interviewed so many of them, like Truly Smith and the Orchids. They were working, you know, they would go, like one of the Orchids said, "Oh, I was in Andrew Lou Oldham's car," you know. They were all felt that they could make it because the possibility was truly there for all of them. And I think in the States it wasn't, you know, you just knew it's like, it's going to be this like independent label that's not going to go anywhere, where here they're on Columbia and they're on Pi. So
you hear so many stories, don't you, of just, these girls who just speculatively just travelled down from, it might have been Bradford or Macclesfield or Birmingham or whatever, just merely because they wanted to sing, and possibly, maybe to their astonishment, realised that it was actually kind of that easy. You know, that someone probably would offer you a deal if you were merely willing to do it.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of an unrepeatable time, isn't it?
Yeah. God.
Who was the singer? I'm looking at my notes. I'm trying to find them. But who was the singer who almost refused to sign a deal because the record label wouldn't sign her band, and her band encouraged her to just go it alone?
Was it Beryl Marsden?
I think it might have been Beryl Marsden. Yeah.
Yeah, because she was pissed about, and I know it's a different meaning, pissed off, with how she was treated, because she was in a rock and she was fronting like R&B band, and she wanted rock and roll all the way, and then the label came in and saying, "We want to put you in a tiara and a puffy dress," and I think she burst into tears. So they sent her in that direction, and she was not happy.
And also, but I'm glad you put Beverly Cutner as she was then, with Where the Good Times Are, which I think was originally a B-side, wasn't it?
I can't remember. Well, it
Was
was
it Happy New
Happy
Year
New
with-
Year is the other side. Yeah,
I think so. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
as
I think
well.
you're right about that.
But
Yeah,
Where the Good Times Are is such an amazing. Again, it kind of edges into freakbeat, doesn't it?
it does. And there's your answer with the difference between American and British girls, right? Records like that weren't being made at that in the U.S. in that style. Like this is all about Britain. A record like that.
Yeah, her story's amazing as well. I mean, she sort of toured with at the time. I think she toured with Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah,
and then
she
had
did.
to come home, didn't she? Because her mother died.
Oh, it's a very depressing story.
Her story is really.
yeah.
I mean, then she met John Martin. And it was
And all went.
I know,
yeah.
I know. But she did not before making a couple of great records with him, but then it kind of all went.
It got dark. And she wrote a book about it, which I read actually when I was doing these liner notes. I love that. I love really delving into the personal stories of these women.
But again, it's that kind of encourages into that labour of love territory, because you just want to do the job well. And it's just wanting to do the job well, because you can't. It doesn't necessarily, you can't justify it financially.
No, no, when I do this, and sometimes when I get frustrated with how difficult, because I find writing very difficult, or just putting the project together can often be, with the licensing, it can take a while, or I always try and remember, like, this person thought this was their chance, and they had, their whole heart was usually in it. Everything was riding on it. It meant the world to them. They're now in a very different position. Probably there's a little bit of, sadness looking back. And so I want to honor their story. And I really try and keep that in mind with every person that I'm covering.
Yeah.
That the hope and the joy and the excitement and and then also the truth about what may not have happened later on, so
you got I think you have your connection with the music of Leslie Gore is a sort of case in point, and you've put together a compilation which it's an expanded reissue
of the Girl Talk album.
Of the Girl Talk album,
Yes.
that's right. And you met her, didn't you, about a year before she died?
I did, yeah. So Mick put together the reissue Girl Talk, and he asked me to do the notes, and he said, Leslie Gore's around. Why don't you get in touch and do an interview? So I went to her apartment, and up on the Upper East Side, penthouse apartment, beautiful. Sat there with her and her dog. And she was so forthcoming and so open about her life. I mean, she had really been through hell when we sat together to talk. There was no mention of any illness, but her former apartment had burned down, and she was in this whole lawsuit with former landlords. And she was saying just how exhausted she was from it. So it was really it was a bit heavy.
Yeah.
But she was also she spoke so openly about what it was like to be a woman in the industry, and how much better she knew she could have done had sexism not been a part of her career, and that she really became a capable songwriter and producer, but no man would look at her as a producer. I mean, of course not. You're a female, you're a producer. There's no way. So she would tell me stories about how, she was practically producing some of these records, yet like the guy, who just got his first job, in the office would all of a sudden be given a production credit because he had a family and that he needed to support. And so the boys are going to take care of him. So there was a lot of stories about that, a lot of her kind of how aware she was of the need for, feminism, and she was going to fight for it. So she was working very closely with young people, and how You Don't Own Me became the anthem, and how it's still the anthem. And so it was such I just thought, this woman is incredible. She's so rich and so, as a person.
And she was ready to tell her story, as people so often are, at that point where I guess, they must be wondering whether or not they will be remembered as they want to be remembered.
Yeah.
And so I guess she would have been grateful to have had someone like you there who to sort of listen, really.
I think. I mean, she was great. She was very open. I felt like she didn't hold back, and she was happy to share. And
I listened to, and she was still writing great songs, sort of, late on. Even there's some great tracks on her last album.
Yeah.
And she co-wrote. I didn't know until a few years ago that the Michael Gore who wrote the song Fame was her brother.
It's her brother.
And they co-wrote a couple of songs on that soundtrack.
Yeah, there was one Irene Cara song that won a Grammy that she co-wrote. Is it Out Here on My Own?
Yeah,
that's the one, right? Yeah.
I mean that as well, you know. So what a pedigree. So where are you? So you're sort of you got irons in the fire.
I do.
What can we expect further down the line?
Well, I have a compilation of a Spanish singer named Jeanette, who I always use the word obsessed, but I am. It's true. I'm
obsessed with her. What do we need to know about Jeanette? Tell us what we need to know about
Jeanette. So Jeanette was born in London, raised in Los Angeles, and then moved to, actually maybe then Chicago and then Los Angeles. I hope I'm getting this right, but I might not be. And then to Spain. And so she was a teenager in Spain, and she was singing, and she became a part of a group. She joined a group called Picnic as the lead singer, and there was this kind of folky, beautiful songs, and she just has a voice like nobody else. It's so soft. It's like the softest, silkiest voice, and so melodic. And then she ended up having having a solo career and working with some of the best Spanish songwriters, and it's very romantic, dreamy music. So I've compiled some of the Picnic stuff and some of Jeanette's solo material on the Hispavox label and later on Areola, and it's from like late 60s until mid 80s, and so it's kind of a real span. And so it's going to be a compilation of all that material, and I interviewed Jeanette as well. So that's next up on the Ace record label.
And how did she enter your world?
She entered my world. I was on vacation. Was I in the Bahamas? I was in the Caribbean. That's where we Americans like to take our vacations if we can. And there was a DJ, and I ran up to him, and I thought this was pre-Shazam, pre-internet. And I ran up to him, and I said, "Who is this?" And he said, "It's Jeanette, and the song is called Por qué te vas." So I went back home and I did all my research and bought the single and thought, "Oh my God, I've landed upon a treasure," and then bought every record with her name on it. And then I saw her live recently. She came to New Jersey. I was like my friend Gaylord Fields, who's an FMU DJ, he's writing the liner notes to this actually.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So the two of us went to this gig where like all these major Spanish stars performed. We're the only people that don't speak Spanish. And like Jeanette is performing. We're like singing her lyrics. And she, and she's still out there performing.
You must have made a few friends that night, I would imagine, if you
just
drew attention.
Why are you here?
I like it. Well, I get that whenever I go and see it. One of my favourite Italian singers, Paolo Conte, and I'm invariably the only British person in the audience. And
you get it, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't sing along. No one would thank me if I said that, if I sang along. And you're
So Jeanette for Ace, and I have a couple of other irons in the fire at Ace, but too soon to say because it has nothing's been.
Good.
And I'm also working on a compilation for Numero Group girl groups. Yes, independent label girl groups.
I was going to say, that if you at some point you're destined to do something for Numero Group.
I'm very excited about that. I have a big smile saying Numero Group.
So what's the kind of angle on the Numero Group comp?
So it's female artists on independent labels and stuff yes, exactly. So they have a compilation out that's coming out I think this Friday called Basement Beehive. So it's kind of underground girl groups. Okay. And so this is going to be part 2 to that.
Because they're sort of very kind of tapped into that sort of very good at kind of sourcing kind of regional things and sort of I love their kind of kid soul compilations.
Yeah.
The ABCs. One of us was the ABCs, one was the 1, 2, 3s.
Yeah.
Some really kind of life affirming stuff on that as well.
And they've managed to dig out some real gems that no one has gotten to yet. So it's exciting to do something for them.
Isn't it great that sort of the people, we kind of find each other, don't we? All around the world.
We do.
It's very good. It's very gratifying.
Yeah. And then one last thing that it's completely different from anything I've ever done is that I have 2 co-writes on the upcoming Saint Etienne EP.
No.
Yeah. So I'm kind of dipping my toes into songwriting. It's so nuts. Well, again, Bob. I mean, really, Bob is probably the most influential person in my life, and I am so happy that he exists.
Yeah.
So, because I've followed his path in such a big way, really.
Yeah, he's one. influential on my life too.
Yeah, which is so nice. So he sent me a couple of backing tracks, and because we had done a little bit of work at Xenomania together, and so he knew that I was in kind of curious about the whole songwriting thing, and so he's like, why don't you try writing some melodies over these tracks? And at Russ Titleman, who used to be a songwriter in the 60s and then became a well-known record producer. So him and I are good friends. And so Russ and I kind of I was like, Russ, why don't you and I try writing on one of these songs?
You co-opted Russ Titleman into co-writing a Etienne song with
Basically. So now Russ, and the band and me have one song, and then I wrote another song with the band. So 2 co-writes on the Saint Etienne Surrey EP. So now
Amazing.
That's kind of where I don't have a goal for it, but I want to do more songwriting.
That's a big tick on the list, isn't it? That's a good one.
Yeah.
God, he's asked me a couple of times if I've never sort of quite. Now that you've done it, I feel like re-energized. I might
do it, because. I mean, people do say that music journalists are kind of that we all desire to be artists. I don't know if failed artist is the right word. That's not the right word, but like aspiring artists in some way.
Yeah.
And I know that at a very young age, I was kind of looked upon as, well, Sheila, you're good at writing about music, and you're good at this and that, but I don't think you're an artist, or I don't think you have it. And so I always believed that. I thought, okay, I'm not. I don't have the talent or the ability. But then, as you age and you kind of see people making music, you're like, it doesn't matter. It's just expression. It's nothing to do whether you're good or bad or able or not able. It's why not just explore that part?
Why not just have the fun?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to have the fun, because I remember sitting with Russ and I said, I don't know if I can do this. And he kind of looked at me, he's like, well, I don't know if you can do it either, but let's just try it.
Yeah.
And I could. I can write pretty decent melodies. So
that's everyone wakes up with an earworm from time to time, and once in a while those earworms don't exist outside your head.
Exactly.
So one final question.
Yes.
What's top of your wants list at the moment?
Oh,
what's eluded you so far?
Oh my God, there's so many things. There's a record I was introduced to a few years ago called I Will Sacrifice by Irma Rutin, which costs like $9 million. So I'll never find that unless I find it,
Have you got a cutoff, with the maximum that you would spend on a record?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent $400 a couple of times on some 45s, but normally I will. That's only there's maybe 2 records that I've spent that much money on. I have some friends that will spend $800 on a 45. I just can't do it, know. No. But that doesn't seem like I love that record, but it's not like the top. That's such a. Oh God, I can't think of it.
It's okay.
I'm sure I've asked Bob, do you have this? Oh, I don't have Jackie Trent's You Baby. That's another Northern record that I've never. And then Lorraine Silver, Lost Summer Love, 2 records that were in demand when I started collecting this stuff. So now even more in demand.
Okay.
So forget about it.
And if you found them in a shop and they're reasonably priced, is it the kind of thing whereby you'd be all cool about it? You'd kind of take it to the shop in a really to the counter in a really kind of glacial kind of no big deal way, or would you be really trying hard not to kind of lose yourself? Trying
hard not to lose myself. That's happened a few times where I've seen something, I'm like, this record's worth $200 and it's $50 and I'm having a heart attack inside, and I want to tell the clerk that he has a serious record on his hands, and then I feel guilty. But I'm like, you know what? He has it priced at this price. I'm going to very coolly go up there and buy it, walk away, and scream my head off.
I have recurring dreams about that kind of thing.
It happens.
I enjoy I enjoy those recurring dreams.
I bet. But then you wake up, you're like, I don't have that record.
Yeah. I also have recurring dreams about certain record shops that exist in real life locations, but actually in real life there's never been a shop in those locations.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that's a collector thing. Maybe. Anyway, I digress. Sheila, it's been a joy.
So much fun.
Flown by. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Sheila B, do check out her WFMU show every week. Can you remind us of the time?
Yes, every Friday, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. UK time on WFMU.org.
Like a pro. You are a pro. You've been listening to the ACE podcast. I've been Pete Paphides. I hope you've enjoyed it, and keep listening. For more excellent music, you can scoot over to the Ace Records website, www.acerecords.co.uk, for all the wonderful music you could possibly need.